We are family, and that's what matters. Let us raise a glass to new beginnings.
The glass door had not even met my hand when my mother's voice slipped through the warm yellow light like a thin blade. Thank God Elise didn't come. Tonight, we can finally breathe. Laughter burst out right after that, light and easy, as if the thing they had just cast off was not their daughter's presence, but a heavy coat shrugged from their shoulders. I stood frozen on the porch of the riverside mansion, rain still clinging to my shoes, my fingers tightening around the dark blue velvet box I had brought as an anniversary gift for my parents. In that moment, I did not feel cold because of the wind. I felt cold because I finally understood a truth I had spent years refusing to name. Vanessa spoke next, her voice sweet as honey poured over a blade. If she were here, she would turn the whole dinner into an audit. Everyone laughed again. No one objected. No one looked uncomfortable. Even my father, the man who used to tell me that family was the safest place in the world, let out a short approving snort. I stepped back once. Then once more. The gift box in my hand suddenly felt as heavy as stone. I had chosen that pearl bracelet for my mother myself, the classic one she had paused to admire in a shop window in Charleston last year. I remembered the way her eyes had brightened then, like a young girl's. I remembered thinking, this time, maybe I will make her happy. That thought now felt painfully naive. I placed the gift box gently on the wicker chair by the porch, so gently it was almost tender. Then I turned and walked away. No storming in. No confrontation. No tears turned into entertainment for the people raising their glasses in gratitude for my absence. Behind me, jazz music still drifted out through the crack in the door, soft and elegant, as if that house truly belonged to a happy family. But that house was mine. 3 months earlier, when I signed the papers to buy this riverside mansion, I had stood by the great window, looking at the water stained with late afternoon light, and thought that at last my parents could live their remaining years without worrying about mortgage payments, leaking roofs, or the little bills that kept my mother awake at night. I paid. For everything. No loans. No hesitation. I simply wanted to give them a place beautiful enough that old age would no longer feel like a struggle. Back then, my mother had hugged me with tears in her eyes. My father had slapped my shoulder hard, proud as if he were seeing all his sacrifices bloom at once. Only Vanessa stood behind them in silence, her lips curved into a smile I could not read then. I understood that smile a week later when I came by and found Vanessa's suitcases stacked in the guest house behind the garden. My mother spoke quickly, casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Your sister is only staying for a little while. She is having a hard time. We are family. What is wrong with helping each other a little? I asked why no one had told me first. My father brushed it aside and told me not to turn a small matter into a big one. But that small matter spread like mold beneath fresh paint. Vanessa was not just staying there. She wanted me to pour money into saving her sinking interior design brand. At dinner that night, my mother sat straight-backed and spoke in a soft voice sharpened with pressure, saying I was the only one who could help my sister get back on her feet. My father looked at me as though I were failing a moral test. Vanessa blinked rapidly, playing the role of a woman life had treated too cruelly. I asked to see the books. The whole table went still. Vanessa gave a small bitter laugh and said I had always sounded more like a bank than a sister. I stayed where I was. I looked at every expense, every invoice, every number dancing beneath glossy paper. This was not a business fighting to survive. It was a fire being fed champagne. Lavish launch parties. Expensive image campaigns. Weekend trips disguised as partner meetings. The money had not died because of bad luck. The money had died because of vanity. I closed the file and said, slowly and clearly, that I would not finance irresponsibility dressed up as a dream. My mother's face turned cold at once. My father slammed his hand against the table. Vanessa began to cry with perfect timing, like an actress who knew exactly when the audience needed to be led. My mother called me selfish. My father said I had forgotten where I came from. Vanessa looked at me through her tears, trembling and triumphant at the same time, as if she had finally found the villain she wanted me to become. That night, I cut off every luxury expense I had quietly carried for the family. I still covered the mansion's upkeep. I still took care of essentials. But I stopped being the bottomless wallet they called daughter. And now, standing in the rain outside that glowing house, I finally understood that the cruelest part was not that they needed my money. The cruelest part was that they had never really seen me. In their eyes, I was not the daughter who built them a home. I was only a walking financial doorway. And tonight, hearing them raise their glasses in gratitude for my absence, something inside me did not break. It closed. Quietly. Completely. And far more dangerous than pain. By the next morning, the rain had stopped, but the sound of that laughter still clung to me like damp fabric I could not peel away. I did not call my mother. I did not text Vanessa. I did not ask my father whether he had really sat there and said nothing while his wife thanked God for my absence in a house I had bought with my own hands. Silence had finally become more useful than hope. For 2 weeks, no one reached out. That should have hurt more than it did. Instead, it clarified things. I went back to work, buried myself in shipping reports, investor calls, expansion plans, the clean, brutal logic of a world where numbers meant what they said. In business, betrayal left a trail. In families like mine, it wore perfume and smiled across candlelight. Then Vanessa posted photos from a luxury resort in Sea Island. I saw them late one night after a 12-hour workday, my laptop still open on the kitchen counter, a half-drunk cup of cold tea near my elbow. In the first photo, she stood barefoot on polished wood decking in a white silk dress, one hand holding a glass of sparkling wine, the sunset turning her skin to gold. In another, she sat beside an infinity pool laughing into the shoulder of a man I recognized from Savannah's small circle of investors. The caption read, "Grateful for fresh starts, bold vision, and the people who believe in me." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. 3 weeks earlier, she had been nearly bankrupt. Her accounts were bleeding. Her vendors were pressing. Her business was a beautiful shell filled with smoke. I knew because I had seen the books myself. So where had the money come from? My first instinct was anger. Hot. Fast. Familiar. My second was worse. Suspicion. The next evening, Naomi came over with Thai food and the kind of expression that meant she had already guessed I was not sleeping. Naomi had known me since college, back when I still believed hard work could solve anything if I just kept my head down long enough. She kicked off her shoes, set the takeout on my dining table, and waited until I handed her a plate before speaking. "You saw Vanessa's photos, didn't you?" I gave a humorless laugh. "Was it that obvious?" "You have that look," she said. "The one you get when you are 3 seconds away from setting a building on fire with pure restraint." I should have smiled. Instead, I handed her my phone. Naomi scrolled in silence, her eyes narrowing photo by photo. Then she stopped. Went back. Zoomed in. "Elise." My stomach tightened. "What?" She turned the screen toward me and tapped the lower corner of one image. Vanessa was posing beside a welcome display at some private event, all white flowers and candlelight and expensive understatement. Beneath the event logo was a sponsorship board. One name sat there in clean black lettering. Harper Grant Residences. I frowned. "That is not even her company." "No," Naomi said quietly. "But it sounds close enough to Harper Global Holdings that people would make assumptions." Harper Global Holdings was mine. A chill moved through me so slowly it felt deliberate. My company had spent 10 years building a reputation people trusted. I had fought for every contract, every endorsement, every inch of credibility. Vanessa knew that. My parents knew that. Anyone trading on that name knew exactly what they were doing. Naomi kept scrolling. More details surfaced once she knew what to look for. Vanessa using the Riverside Mansion address on a promotional invite. Vanessa photographed with people who usually only attended events backed by serious capital. Vanessa smiling beneath the illusion of support she had not earned. She is borrowing your credibility, Naomi said. Maybe more than that. The room went very still. A memory rose without warning. Last spring, my grandmother's antique watch had been sitting in the study at the mansion, tucked inside a walnut box lined with faded cream velvet. It had belonged to the only person in my family who had ever loved me without measuring what I could provide. When I dropped by the house the month before, the box had been gone. My mother had said she was having the study reorganized. At the time, I had let it pass. Now I heard her voice differently. Saw her face differently. Saw all of them differently. I stood so quickly my chair scraped the floor. Naomi watched me, saying nothing, because she knew the moment something fragile in me became steel. I am done guessing, I said. Naomi set down her fork. Good. The next morning, I called Simon Vale, a forensic financial investigator known for being discreet, relentless, and expensive. By noon, he was sitting across from me in my office, gray-eyed and unreadable, listening without interruption as I laid out everything. The mansion. The business. The pressure. The silence. The photographs. The borrowed name. When I finished, he folded his hands and asked the question no one else had dared to ask out loud. Ms. Harper, if I dig, how prepared are you to learn this is worse than you think? I looked out the window at the port cranes rising against the Georgia sky like iron crosses. They already thanked God I stayed away, I said. Dig. The file Simon placed on my desk was not thick. That was the first thing that frightened me. Real betrayal did not always arrive as a mountain. Sometimes it came as a slim stack of paper, neat and quiet, carrying enough weight to crush what little innocence a person still had left. The folder was charcoal gray, unmarked, the edges squared with the kind of precision that made bad news feel even colder. Simon did not slide it toward me right away. He simply looked at me for a long second, as if measuring whether I still needed gentleness. I did not. Open it, I said. Inside were copies of loan documents, transfer records, corporate filings, and property papers. At first glance, they looked ordinary. Legal language. Stamped pages. Signatures. Dates. Amounts. The kind of paperwork people trusted because it looked official enough to silence instinct. But instinct was screaming now. Simon spoke calmly, almost clinically. Your parents and your sister used the Riverside property as collateral. I stared at him. That house is protected, I said. Adrian structured the purchase with a recovery clause. They cannot leverage it without me. He nodded once. They could not. So they altered the paperwork. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. Altered. Such a small word for such a filthy act. My eyes dropped back to the documents, scanning faster now, pulse hammering behind my ribs. Then I saw it. My name. My signature. Or something made to resemble it. The room seemed to narrow around me. My hands stayed still, but only because I forced them to. Every line on those pages felt like a thumb pressed against my throat. There was a supplemental filing attached to the property trust, one I had never seen, weakening the very protections my attorney had built into the purchase. It carried initials that mimicked mine well enough to fool a rushed review and signatures that, to someone not looking too closely, might have passed. But I was looking closely. And so was Simon. He pointed to the dates. The sequence. The transfers that followed. The money borrowed against my house had not gone toward survival. It had gone toward performance. Vendor payments meant to delay collapse. Past due luxury invoices. Image consultants. Event production. Premium showroom staging. A campaign to make Vanessa's dying brand appear not merely stable, but thriving. There is more, Simon said. Of course there was. He laid out a second sheet, this one tracing a web of payments through shell entities and temporary accounts. Vanessa had not only been borrowing prestige from my name. She had been using the illusion of my backing to reassure private investors. A few had already been repaid, just enough to keep them loyal and quiet. Others were still exposed. This was no longer a desperate woman overspending on a dream. This was fraud with lipstick on it. I leaned back slowly, but there was nowhere to go. Every memory of my mother defending Vanessa. Every speech from my father about family loyalty. Every trembling tear Vanessa had ever produced at a dinner table. All of it rearranged itself under this new light and became what it had always been. Strategy. My voice came out lower than I expected. Who signed as witness? Simon held my gaze for only a fraction of a second before answering. Your mother. The silence after that was monstrous. I looked down again, and something else caught my eye. A ledger note tied to a private pawnbroker. Item accepted against emergency deposit. Vintage lady's watch, gold, inherited estate piece. My grandmother's watch. For one terrible instant, the office vanished, and I was 8 years old again, sitting on the floor by my grandmother's chair while she let me hold that watch in both hands because I was afraid of dropping time itself. She had once told me that some women in this family survive by becoming small, and some survive by becoming unbreakable. She had touched my chin and said, choose carefully. Now my mother had pawned her memory to fund Vanessa's illusion. I rose from my chair and crossed to the window before the grief could show on my face. The port below moved with its usual precision, steel and cargo and schedules too disciplined to care about heartbreak. Behind me, Simon gathered nothing, said nothing, gave me the dignity of my silence. When I finally turned back, whatever softness had once made me hesitate was gone. Call Adrian, I said. Today. Simon inclined his head. There is one more thing you should know. They are hosting a 40th anniversary dinner this weekend. Guest list is large. Investors, local donors, social contacts. From what I can tell, your absence is part of the plan. It helps them control the story. A bitter smile touched my mouth. No, I said. It helps me. Because now I understood the shape of the game. They had spent years casting me as the cold daughter, the difficult sister, the woman with too much money and not enough heart. Fine. Let them keep that version of me for a few days longer. Let them toast in borrowed light. Let Vanessa glide through one more room wrapped in a reputation she stole from me. Let my parents smile beneath the chandeliers of a house they tried to mortgage behind my back. I was done trying to be loved by people who only valued what they could extract. This was not family conflict anymore. This was evidence. And by the time that anniversary dinner began, I would not be arriving as the unwanted daughter standing in the rain. I would be arriving as the end of everything they had built on my name. I did not storm back to the mansion. That would have given them exactly what they wanted. A scene. A raised voice. A daughter dramatic enough to confirm every lie they had been polishing about me for years. Instead, I sat in my car beneath the dripping oaks across the street and watched the house glow against the black river like a painting of borrowed peace. Inside, they were celebrating 40 years of marriage. Inside, they were drinking wine I had once paid for, laughing beneath chandeliers hung in a house they had tried to steal from me, greeting guests with the polished ease of people who believed appearance could outrun consequence. Through the tall windows, I could see figures drifting from room to room, glasses flashing, silk and dark suits moving through warm gold light. Music spilled out in fragments each time the front door opened. A violin. Laughter. Applause. I should have felt heartbroken. Instead, I felt precise. My phone lit up in my hand. Adrian's name. We are ready, he said. I looked at the front steps of the mansion, at the same porch where I had once stood with a velvet gift box and a hope too fragile to survive the truth. Then I said the only words that mattered. Do it tonight. The next 15 minutes moved with the sharpness of a blade being drawn. Two marked police vehicles rolled up first, quiet but impossible to ignore. Then Adrian arrived with a deputy clerk and a private process server carrying a sealed packet. One unmarked sedan followed behind them, containing a representative from the bank and a document examiner who had already reviewed the forged signatures. They stepped out into the humid Georgia night with the calm efficiency of people who did not need to shout in order to end things. Inside the mansion, the music stopped before I even opened my car door. A few guests turned toward the windows. The first ripple of confusion passed through the party. Then the front entrance opened wide, and one of the caterers stepped back so quickly she nearly dropped a tray of champagne flutes. I stayed where I was, half-shadowed beneath the trees, and watched unease spread from face to face like a stain. Then my father appeared in the doorway. Even from across the lawn, I recognized the rigid set of his shoulders. He had not yet seen me. He saw uniforms, papers, authority. His body language changed at once, pride cracking into alarm. He said something sharp to Adrian, likely demanding an explanation, but Adrian did not move. He merely presented the order. Behind Robert, my mother came into view, one hand pressed to her pearls, her smile already failing. Vanessa was just behind her, beautiful and gleaming and furious beneath the surface, the kind of fury that comes from a person who has spent too long believing consequences are for other people. I stepped out of the car then. The gravel shifted beneath my heels. My mother turned first. Her eyes found me across the lawn, and in that instant I watched recognition strike her like cold water. Not sorrow. Not shame. Fear. The guests saw me next. A hush spread outward, swallowing whispers, then laughter, then the last weak notes of whatever song had been playing. The night itself seemed to still. For years, my family had trained people to see me the same way they did. Too serious. Too distant. Too difficult. The daughter who made everyone uncomfortable by asking questions that should have remained unasked. Tonight, I let them look. I crossed the lawn slowly, not because I was uncertain, but because I wanted every step to land. My father's face darkened as I reached the porch. "What is this?" he snapped. Adrian answered before I could. "This is a court-authorized property repossession and evidence preservation action tied to fraudulent encumbrance, forged signature records, and material misrepresentation in financial filings." Several guests gasped softly. Vanessa recovered first. She always did when an audience was present. She stepped forward, eyes widening with injured disbelief, her voice already tremulous. "Elise, what are you doing? This is Mom and Dad's anniversary." "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the doorway cleanly. "It is the night your lies ran out of room." The words landed harder than if I had screamed them. My mother reached for the frame of the door as though the house itself might steady her. Robert started forward, anger blazing now that fear had somewhere to go, but one of the officers stepped neatly into his path. Behind them, guests were backing away in small embarrassed movements, trying not to appear as though they were witnessing a collapse while clearly unable to look elsewhere. Adrian opened the packet and began reading. Legal ownership. Recovery clause. Invalid modification instruments. Suspected forgery. Immediate suspension of occupancy rights pending formal review. Cooperation required. Failure to comply subject to removal. Each phrase struck the room like a hammer. Vanessa shook her head violently. "This is insane. This is a misunderstanding. Mom, say something. Dad." But Diane was no longer looking at Vanessa. She was looking at me, and for the first time in my life, there was no performance left on her face. Only the naked horror of a woman realizing the daughter she dismissed as cold had been the only person in the family with the power to destroy everything. I had not wanted that power when I bought them this house. I had wanted to give them safety, rest, dignity. But power does not disappear just because it is offered gently. It only waits for the moment it is forced to reveal itself. One of the bank representatives stepped forward then and addressed Vanessa directly, asking whether she wished to explain the supporting materials used to secure the loan. Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it, turned toward my father as though he might save her. Robert looked at Diane. Diane looked at the floor. And then the masterpiece cracked. Vanessa pointed at my mother. She handled the witness papers. My mother recoiled. "You told us it was temporary." Robert exploded. "I told both of you this would go too far." There it was. The truth, spilling out not because conscience demanded it, but because pressure had finally broken the vessel holding it in. A woman near the staircase gave a quiet, shocked exhale. I recognized her a second later. Martha. My father's cousin. The same Martha who had called me weeks earlier to suggest I was neglecting my parents. Now she stared at the three of them as if seeing a stage set collapse and reveal rotten beams underneath. I turned to her only briefly, just long enough for her to understand what she was looking at. No one spoke for me. They did not have to. Adrian instructed the guests to gather personal items and exit through the side doors. Officers remained calm, but immovable. Staff stood frozen. Until one of the caterers finally began clearing champagne from a table no one was touching anymore. The house that had glowed like a celebration only minutes earlier now looked stripped bare under its own expensive light. Vanessa tried one last time, lowering her voice, stepping toward me with tears gathering on cue. "Elise, please. We can talk about this privately." I looked at her and felt nothing that resembled mercy. "You already did your talking privately," I said. "When you forged my name." She stopped. My father muttered something about family, about humiliation, about how this never should have happened in public. I turned to him fully then. "You should have thought about that before using family as camouflage for theft." He flinched. It was a small movement. Barely there. But I saw it. And because I saw it, I knew he understood at last that the daughter he had always mistaken for obedient had never been powerless. I had simply been patient. Within the hour, the anniversary dinner was gone. Guests had scattered into the Savannah night with their whispers and their shock. The floral arrangements still bloomed. Candles still burned down in silver holders. Half-finished drinks sweated onto linen cloths. But whatever fantasy my parents had dressed themselves in was over. Diane stood in the foyer clutching her shawl with both hands. Robert looked 20 years older than he had at the start of the evening. Vanessa stood rigid near the staircase, mascara dark beneath her eyes, finally too angry to fake fragility. I noticed then, on the small table near the entrance, the velvet gift box I had left behind on the porch weeks earlier. No one had opened it. For some reason, that hurt more than anything else. I picked it up. Turned it once in my hand. Then slipped it into my bag. Not everything abandoned had to stay abandoned. By the time the locks were changed, the river beyond the windows had gone black as glass. The officers departed. The legal team followed. One by one, the engines disappeared down the long drive, taking the last witnesses with them. And then there was only silence. I stood alone in the foyer of the house I had bought out of love and nearly lost to greed. The air still carried traces of perfume, candle wax, and expensive food. Evidence of celebration. Evidence of rot. Behind me, the door clicked shut. For the first time in years, I did not feel like the one being left outside. They were. The morning after the anniversary dinner, Savannah woke beneath a pale silver sky, as if the city itself had decided not to look too closely at what had happened behind those grand riverside windows. I woke to my phone vibrating across the nightstand like something alive. Vanessa had posted first. There she was on every platform, a carefully chosen photo of herself in soft lighting, mascara blurred just enough to suggest grief without ruining the symmetry of her face. The caption was surgical in its cruelty. "Last night, my sister threw our elderly parents out of their home during their anniversary dinner. Some people care more about power than family." Within an hour, sympathy flooded in. Horrified comments. Praying hands. Offers of legal help. Distant relatives who had not called me in years suddenly found the strength to type paragraphs about loyalty and respect. My father sent no message. My mother sent one. How could you do this to us publicly? Not what have we done. Not we are sorry. Only that. Publicly. I stared at the screen, then set it face down on the table beside my coffee. Naomi, who had stayed the night without asking because she knew I should not be alone, watched me from the kitchen island. Are you going to respond? She asked. No, I said. That was the old version of me she was trying to bait back into the ring. The one who explained. The one who defended. The one who still believed truth could win if it sounded gentle enough. But truth without timing was just prey. By noon, the second blow landed. Adrian called to tell me my parents had filed an emergency petition through a very ambitious attorney, claiming I had acted in emotional instability and abused my financial control over them. Vanessa, apparently not content with public pity, had also launched a legal defense fund online wrapped in language about elder cruelty, female success turning cold, and private family grief. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was so shameless it crossed into something almost holy in its audacity. Good, I said to Adrian. Let them keep talking. By then, Simon had already finished what he called the cleanup map. Every forged signature. Every altered clause. Every transfer. Every payment made to silence investors, delay creditors, and stage Vanessa's illusion of success. The bank had opened its internal review. 2 of Vanessa's private backers had quietly contacted counsel. And then the surprise came from the last place I expected. Martha. She asked to meet me in person. We sat in a quiet tea room far from the river, where the china was too delicate for the weight of what she had to say. Her hands trembled when she lifted her cup. I was wrong about you, she said. I believed what they said because it was easier than imagining your own family would do something like this. Then she told me what she had heard the night of the dinner, before the officers arrived. Vanessa joking to one of the guests that the paperwork had been handled months ago and that I would never know until everything was too tied up to reverse. Martha had not understood the meaning then. She understood it now. I asked if she would testify. She nodded before I finished the sentence. 3 weeks later, the story cracked open. Adrian arranged one press statement. Not a spectacle. Not a revenge parade. Just facts. Dates. Documents. A timeline precise enough to suffocate every lie Vanessa had dressed in tears. And at the end of it, with my consent, he released the audio clip from outside the mansion. My mother's voice. Vanessa's laugh. That bright, casual gratitude for my absence. The public turned with breathtaking speed. Vanessa's fundraiser was frozen. Her sponsors vanished. Her investors moved from anxious to furious. The petition against me collapsed under evidence so overwhelming the judge barely entertained it. The forged documents were referred for criminal review. My parents lost occupancy rights permanently and were drawn into civil liability for their roles in the fraud. By the time the ruling became final, their social circle had already done what courts only formalized. It left them. I did not celebrate. On the first quiet Sunday after it was over, I returned to the mansion alone. The house was still, washed in afternoon light. I walked into the study and placed my grandmother's watch, finally recovered from the pawnbroker, on the mantel above the fireplace. For a long time I stood there without moving. I had spent years trying to earn love from people who only loved access. I thought surviving them would feel like victory. Instead, it felt like air. Clean, sharp, honest air filling a place in me that had been starved for too long. They had called me cold because I would not let them devour me. They had called me difficult because I could see through them. They had called me heartless because my heart finally chose itself. And if you have ever been punished for setting a boundary, if you have ever been painted as cruel simply because you stopped being useful, then you already know this truth. Walking away is powerful. But making them face what they did is something else entirely. Tell me in the comments. If you were in my place, would you have stopped at the front porch, or would you have taken it all the way to the end? And if stories like this speak to something you have lived, like this video, subscribe to Still Waters Payback, and stay with me for the next story.